I think. There we go. Yay! Welcome everyone. This is the Teachers with Guts monthly webinar. It's August 2nd of 2017. I'm Irene Lee, and I think Sue Gibbs is somewhere there, as is Paige Prescott. And today we want to see if anyone's out there who wants to share any stories or strategies. Hi, Sue. And then we're going to have an interview with Hal Scheintaub from Governor's Academy in Byfield, Massachusetts, and see some of his students' demos. He's had a couple students here at the MIT STEP Lab this summer working on star logo NOVA models. So they'll share those as well. And then we'll do some quick updates about the teacherswithguts.org site. So anyone have anything they want to share out? Any insights, strategies, roadblocks, etc.? Matt? I can tell you one thing I learned. I was talking to a teacher yesterday who was saying that students 7th and 8th grade really had difficulty with abstracting between relative coordinates and relative angles and absolute ones. So that's something to consider as we design our activities and tune our models and lessons. The good news is the community's grown. We're up to over 700 members now on the teacherswithguts.org site. So welcome, especially to our new members. Now we're going to interview Hal Scheintaub. Hal is a science teacher at Governor's Academy, as I mentioned. We met Hal, gosh, the early 2000s. He was working with Eric Klopfer on Star Logo, the text-based version. But all these years he's been teaching complex systems and science and has a lot of insights and new lessons to share. So Hal, why don't you grab screen? I'll stop share. Ping. Do you have it? Okay.
I got it, I think. Yep, look good.
Okay, and I will start the interview. So Hal, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So yeah, just a little bit. I was trained as in cell physiology and biophysics, always doing some education. And then after being a research scientist for about a dozen years, there was an opportunity to become a full-time high school teacher, which is what I always wanted to do. So I made the jump, became a classroom teacher, a science teacher. And in addition, I became an experiential ed leader and a baseball coach.
Fabulous.
And all of these experiences have come together, and I'll be sharing that with you as how that happened.
Can you tell us more about your background using models and simulation in your science classrooms?
Yeah, so like right about 2001, it was sort of early in my teaching career, and there was the people were really interested in technology and using technology in the classroom. But it looked there was like all these there were these games, but they were just like drill and practice, and it wasn't very exciting, and I wasn't really sold on it until I met Eric here at MIT. And I found Eric because I was interested in teaching a unit on the evolution of cooperative behavior, and one of my students will talk about that a little bit later. So I was interested in that, and Eric had created a web activity on that topic, and I came to see him, and then he introduced me to Star Logo. And I remember at that time what he said, and he said here at MIT, like the MIT people were looking to use technology to teach things that otherwise couldn't be taught. And I thought that was really cool, and I really grabbed onto that vision. Or to state it another way, it was to make accessible, make ideas accessible to all students and not only the smartest students. So this was a really powerful motivator. Around that same time, I was having these really dramatic, these really powerful experiences with students in the field, whether it be hiking in the field or on the ball field, and I was struck with the difference between the type of learning that was happening outside the classroom and the type of learning that was inside the classroom. And I hope to be able to bring some of that sense of adventure and passion that I found on the field and bring it into the classroom. And surprisingly, technology was the vehicle for that.
Huh. How did you first get involved with the Star Logo Nova team or Star Logo team? Did you, you were in touch with Eric. Did you start going to workshops, or did you provide them with lessons, or how did that relationship?
I wasn't providing anything. I was like a total consumer. Eric said, "Hey, we got this workshop happening in the summer. You'd be interested in programming?" And I went, I had like some terrible programming experiences in school, and I didn't really want to revisit it. But I liked Eric, so I said, "Sure, I'll come to the workshop." And a colleague of mine at Governor's said, a history teacher, said, "That sounds like fun." So we carpooled, drove down to MIT every day for a couple of weeks, and started the programming, and it was programming about complex systems, and it was the complex systems ideas that were really, really fascinating, and the group of teachers who came together around that Eric brought together were really super interesting. And so it was a group of colleagues as well as fascinating science topic, and lots of possibilities. It was all possibilities. And so then the following summer, I volunteered to be a volunteer facilitator out in Santa Fe at SFI. We did a workshop up there, Adventures in Modeling.
Right. So tell us how you use Star Logo Nova in your classroom now.
Yeah. So it really wasn't easy. It really wasn't easy bringing the technology into the classroom. And I was lucky because I teach at a private school, and I have like ideal teaching environment. And so I'll have like 15 students, and most of them are pretty motivated. And so this environment was an environment where you could see what was possible. And the idea was to, use my classroom as a lab classroom to try to develop and perfect activities that could then be scaled up. And there's a couple of things that we came to, like Eric and I, and we came to one is like these activities, instead of saying, I wish school wasn't the way it was, like to take advantage of school structure and curriculum as part of the motivation for the technology activities. And the other was contextualize the activity, like sort of make sure that the technology activity, the programming activity, is connected to something else in the student's life or in their experience. And the other is connect the virtual world to the physical world so it doesn't seem removed. So like and it's ideal if you can do a lab and then a simulation, or if you can do a participatory simulation and then a computer simulation, you've got a physical component and you've got a virtual component. Mm-hmm. The other big thing was using games as well as simulations, and the Education Arcade here at MIT was really great to be part of and be around all these fun-loving people and to realize that the power of games in learning. And then whatever the activity was, the debrief is absolutely critical. So you can do all sorts of great activities, whether they be labs or simulations. But if you don't debrief them, then it doesn't stick. Like you really have to like reserve time and really work on debriefing skills. They're as important as anything else that you can do.
Great, thank you, Hal.
So what I'd like to do is if I in a few moments is to share a couple of games with you guys and show how I use these games, and sort of in your mind you can say, okay, well I could use this game, or maybe some of this would help in the simulations that I use. So I'm going to show you this game called Lure the Labyrinth, and if you go to the site you'll see something like this, and you could play the whole video game, but if you don't want to do that in your classroom, which you probably don't, you can go right to the puzzles. So you go like play a puzzle, and we're going to look at this employee cafeteria game. Now this I've used this with students from middle school all the way to juniors in my physics class. And so what we do is put the students in this situation, and then they say, well, what are they going to do? And they get no instructions. Eventually they figure out that they need to press on the arrow, and they see these bunch of foods in the cafeteria, and you sort of don't know what to do. So maybe, you put the food on this tray, and you get some hints as to whether you're right or not. And that one, well, looks like it was a mistake. And eventually, you get a whole bunch of different foods, and you have to put them on the trays. And initially, you have no idea what you're doing, so you're just sort of guessing. But each time you guess, you get some information. So, well, I wonder, maybe everybody needs to get a salad. And you go through, the students go through and they play this game, and then, these burgers, I'm not really sure what to do with the burger. And it seems sort of silly, but the kids, get into it, and eventually, they finish the game. When they finish the game, what they've done is they've gone through the full scientific method. What they have to do is they explore, they gather information, then they start making some guesses, and they gather more information, and then they eventually see a pattern. From the pattern, they're able to make a prediction and then refine and test. What's really cool about this game is that there are a number of different patterns. There are visual spatial patterns as well as mathematical patterns. So you can look at patterns across the group and patterns within each individual tray. So this really sets the scene for science teaching, especially physics, or it could be biology too, where you want to be able to, the students to be able to find patterns in the data. They want to be able to look for patterns, because that's really what science is all about. And it's really a lot of fun. And then even after they've played the game, they'll still have some difficulty like describing the patterns that they saw. There's a whole bunch of other games on the site besides the cafeteria, and it's great for math teachers, great for science teachers, and introduces the students to this is what we call the simulation cycle. And here they're observing, collecting data, generating questions, and they play a little bit more, get some more data, generate questions. This is then coupled later to some programming activities where they design a simulation and they build it and they see how it works, and then they change the design and so forth. So this is sort of setting the scene for the course itself. Another game that developed here at MIT, which is really lots of fun, is called Whoosh. And this is really a fascinating game. Again, it can be for math, it can be for science. And it has this weird music in the background. And it sets up like this. And again, the students are faced with a minimum of instructions. And this game is pretty simple. You use the arrow keys to move your agent around, move your avatar, and then you just have to get the treasure. And what happens is, so there's a little bit of skill involved. Whoops. There's a little bit of skill involved. And then this happens, and all of a sudden you do this, and then you discover that you're going to make some ramps, and then you get caught up in the game, and you're going to make these ramps, and when you succeed, you get up to the top and you move to the next level. Each one gets a little bit more complicated, and pretty soon this is really pretty interesting what happens in the classroom. You're going to try to get around the bombs, and maybe that'll work. And the students go through this activity. What they're not realizing is, I'm going to kill that. What they don't realize is that the rules for the ramps are the same as the rules for position versus time graphs in physics. And what I do after playing this game with the students is to ask them what the rules, after they finish the game, what the rules for the ramps are. And it's pretty amazing because their fingers know how to play the game, but they can't take that experience and express it in words. And that's using this game is a great way to show the students how that you can know your fingers can know how to do something, physically you can know how to do something, but yet you can't state what you did. You don't know consciously what you did. And science learning, that happens a lot in science learning. You sort of have an intuitive sense of what's going on, but the challenge is moving it from the intuitive realm into the conscious verbal realm is probably part of the challenge of science learning. And and math learning as well. This is a great way to play with that challenge. What I noticed, so just to go one step further, the experiential ed teaching and using technology in the classroom, all I realized one time that they're really, really similar. The energy that I saw in the field was the same energy that the kids brought to the games and simulations. And so what I realized was that if you have good technology in your classroom, good games and simulations, those simulations and those activities become what's called challenging actions in experiential education. It's a powerful, concrete experience that you then spend time reflecting on. Like you have the experience, you reflect on the experience, and then you generalize the experience. And that's what was happening in the whoosh game. The kids had the experience, we talked about it, then they said, okay, this is the pattern, this is what happens, this is really how you build the ramps. Then you can go back into the game or simulation and see whether your abstraction actually holds up. And it's a real powerful way. It's a powerful thing to be aware of as you set up your technology lessons. So the goal was, okay, I can use technology to teach kids things that I otherwise wouldn't be able to teach by making that technology a powerfully engaging experience, and then use experiential ed technique, which is basically debrief and abstraction, to bring home the learning. And so those are sort of some big ideas, I think, in using the technology, in your classroom. It's got to be, correct. It's great if it's curricular, contextualize with experience that the students have had before, or what you do and you haven't experienced with them, and then connect the virtual world and the real world, and then debrief.
Great. Thank you for sharing that, Hal. So I guess we were going to go on to tell us more about the resources that you developed that you're now sharing with the Teachers with Guts community.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. One of the things that I realized in doing this, developing some of these activities, was that the big ideas are really hard to teach, but they're not necessarily difficult to learn. So if you as the teacher can get inside the difficult topic and really figure out what the difficulty is, then you can construct a series of activities that will help, that help bring the students to the learning place. And that doesn't have to be hard. The hard work, like we do the hard work, and then we can make it easy for the students. I think that's always been my goal. We put together here at MIT, we put together a series of activities that some of you might have, heard of, the biograph activities. This is there was really one big idea that we wanted students to be able to come away with, really to understand that if individuals don't evolve or change genetically, how is it possible for populations to do that? And one of the things, in learning difficult ideas, students need some practice. They need some practice with the idea in easy situations before they do the difficult situation. So the practice is really practiced with the concept of emergence. And for students to be able to look at individuals and look at populations and be able to move smoothly from what are the individuals doing, what's the population doing, what's the individuals doing, what the population is doing. And that's difficult to do. And you can use participatory simulations like turn and walk. You can use real life examples like they themselves and the groups that they're part of. So you can help them see this like by understanding that they are sons and daughters, they're brothers and sisters, they're classmates, teammates, members of an orchestra. They have several different roles, and in each one of those roles, they behave slightly differently. So to see and see how their interactions with other people in those groups like really affect their behavior. So you can do that over a period of time with participatory simulation, then with the predator-prey simulation that you see on guts, and then you have populations. You have populations of grass that are sprouting, and you have bunnies and hopping, reproducing, and dying. But bunny and grass populations are cycling. And it's not too hard for the students to see how the cycling of populations emerges from the behaviors of the individuals in those populations. And then now they've had lots of experience with going from individual to group. And so when they get to learning about evolution, using a simulation, they can see, they can understand how different genetic characteristics of the different fish can be responsible for certain populations surviving and others not surviving under different conditions in the pond. And
Hal?
Yeah.
I have a request for, so I think to fulfill this request, you have to stop sharing screen, but then people will be able to see you talk.
Okay. Oh, cool. Okay. That's great. So,
but when you want to demo something again, going back into share screen.
Okay. So, so I want to stop sharing screen. Okay.
Yeah. And now when you talk, we should be able to see you in the big view.
Okay. So because I see you right now.
Does everyone see Hal? Okay. Talk, Hal.
Okay. I'm talking.
Oh yeah, now we see you in full view. Good.
Okay. All right. Cool. Okay. So what I did in addition, so I tackled some last summer. I had some students working here at MIT with me, and we put together a series of activities to help students learn projectile motion. And here again, there was a big idea that projectile motion is really difficult for physics students to learn. And so it's like, okay, why is this so difficult? Like, what's the problem here? I don't get it. It's you have horizontal motion and vertical motion, and together they produce the curved path of a projectile. But students have a really hard time with that. And so, in talking to my summer students, like, I realized that the problem is that they need some practice with the concepts of independent and dependent change. So, like, you can have things happening at the same time, but the two things are happening independent of one another. Or you can have two things happening at the same time where there indeed is a dependence. One change depends on another. And so that sounds really vague. And I thought that Star Logo would be perfect for giving the students that experience. So I put together a series of activities that would bring the students logically and slowly through a series of activities to help them understand change and change in general, and then specific types of change that would help them understand projectile motion. And that all is, and I'll just go to this for a moment. The overview of that activity is on the Guts website, and there's a summary of it, and there's 4 activities where sometimes students are building simulations, sometimes they're modifying and using simulations, and they get led to a place where when they finally program projectile motion, it's just natural. They just get it, and they don't need, they don't have any misconceptions that they usually do when they're trying to learn it in physics class. So let's see, let me go out of that. Let's see, maybe. So the activity itself is quite structured, and I wasn't quite sure about this. Like, the students are led through a very structured activity because these students have never seen Star Logo before, and so this first activity serves as an introduction to the tool as well as an introduction to the topic. And I thought I was a little nervous about that. I didn't know that would be possible. It would be possible to do that, but it turns out that the students take to it really smoothly. And what I found was this activity that I used in my regular physics class, I could also use in the conceptual physics class. And this summer, with my students who you're going to meet in a moment, we also did some workshops with middle school kids, and we used this activity to as an introduction to programming for the middle school kids who are in a video game, an introduction to programming and video game design workshop. And so it seems to be quite useful. The product, what they end up doing is be able to change a whole lot of traits of their agents based on independent keystrokes. And so they get the idea that changes can happen at the same time, but they're independent if they have independent causes. And the simulation ends up looking something like this. And they can use the arrow keys to move the agent around. They can use the color key to change the agent's color. They can change the shape of the agent as well, and they can change the height of the agent also. And so they gradually build up. They set up some agents, and then they gradually build up the code where they see that they're using different arrow keys to accomplish different changes. And it ends up being a really playful activity, and they really, it's really an enjoyable activity for them. And it can serve as an introduction to more creative Star Logo activities, or for your more physics activities. And let's see, I'll go on just for a short time more. Mm-hmm. Go once more to share screen. Summarizing the rest of the activities, which if we want some at some future date, we can look at them in more detail. The dependent change is talking about the students write some code where they have link changes, and then you can look at the differences in the code. And the advantage here is this: you have something really, really concrete that the students have built that you can then discuss abstractly. So this is independent change. We have two separate causes for two separate changes in the x direction, in the x location, change in size. And here, one cause causes a change in the x location, which ends up causing a change in size. The activity sequence then moves into more mathematical realm, where the students see how x and y changes can result in making diagonals and curved lines. And finally, the projectile motion itself, they write the code for accelerated motion in the y direction that they couple with constant velocity in the x direction, and see how this simple code that they now understand really well results in projectile motion. So that's sort of a summary of my activities. And we'd like to take some time for you to see some of the work that my students have done. And the students this summer, they were new to Star Logo, and they each chose different topics. Nathan, who you'll meet first, modeled a complicated biological phenomena called ion trapping. Kevin took the evolution of cooperative behavior that brought me here and took the question and made a Star Logo model that begins to explore how the evolution of cooperative behavior is possible. And then David took the Star Logo tool, and pushed it about as far as he can to create a fractal generator.
So Hal?
Yeah.
These are high school students?
These are high school students from Govs who are in the summer between their junior and senior year.
Junior and senior.
And
Thank you.
they self-selected, they volunteered to do this summer. Summer.
Great.
Okay, so I will, so we'll stay on share screen, and Nathan can.
I just wanted to, Hal?
Yeah.
I just wanted to say one thing. Sue Gibbs wrote that we are noticing the activity changes X and Y rather than using forward one. So it really helps reinforce coordinate geometry.
Yeah, there's lots of math. In each one of these activities has math concepts that are emphasized, math concepts and programming concepts, as well as the physics concepts. Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it works. It works X, Y. It doesn't work with it's like nice to have a sphere or a cube instead of like an agent that's facing in a certain direction to have the movement. Mm-hmm.
Nathan. So I made, as Doc said, a simulation of ion trapping.
Okay.
So one of the primary reasons that he asked me to do it because it's sort of a complicated phenomenon to understand. So I'll just run through how it works quick, and I'll talk a little bit about it when it loads.
There it goes. So first, Nathan, did you have a certain aspect of the phenomena that you were aiming to emphasize, or what was the target goal?
Well, I started out with more of a simple demonstration of it, and then moved on to a little bit more complicated that had more features in it, as you'll see in a second.
Okay.
So up here, these are all the UI buttons. And so I really did a lot of UI because I made it pretty complicated. There's all sorts of different scenarios you can put the simulation in. So I'll just start it up with a simple one, and just with water, and have water just moving around. So right here, I just have agents that look like O's and agents that are H's to represent oxygen and hydrogen. So they're going around, so O2 is there. And then the top left, you see three boxes, H2O, H3O, and HO, to demonstrate hydrogen that's been ionized. I mean, water that's been ionized, either hydrogen monoxide. It's not solid. So ionized water. So then the blue ones with three hydrogens around it are H3O, and the pink ones, that one just disappeared, with one hydrogen is water that's been ionized the other way. So, oops. And then what I also did for this, I made it more complicated so to demonstrate actual ion trapping. So I can have two different types of water separated by a phospholipid bilayer, which is what ion trapping is. It's when you take a drug like aspirin, for example, it's a weak acid, and then when it goes in your stomach's very acidic, so it won't ionize, and that will allow it to cross into a cell membrane, and then it will ionize because the cell is not as acidic, and then it won't be able to escape the cell. So I start this, as you can see, the ionized water is bouncing off this bilayer. In this water molecule that isn't ionized, it passed through. And then if I make acid appear on the left side, the darker ones are non-ionized, and the lighter ones are. So the darker ones will pass through. They'll turn into lighter ones if they collide with the HO, and then they won't be able to pass back to the other side. So the way I did this is with a lot of blocks. So just for example, this is all the code for the UI. It's a lot of blocks of just telling things to turn off and on again. The main thing that took a while was getting the collision to work between the oxygen and other oxygens and the acids and bases. So I created all these procedures with all these if statements to tell it what to do when it collides. And I also have the same thing for the acids and the base, and then just the behavior of the hydrogens as they swap who they are following around.
Hey, Nathan, I think from a teacher perspective, it would be great to have the different versions of this model with different functionality, so you didn't have the multiple overlaying UI. But
yeah, it something like that it's just separating it out. The way I did it just here is just so it's all in one thing, so you can all see it together. It just for purposes of it's just one big simulation that can do everything.
Right.
Making lots of smaller simulations is just as easy. It just takes a bit more time, so you have to redo the code each and every time.
Okay.
So that's about what mine is. And then these boxes over here, you can change little parameters. So if you're, say, for example, if you were teaching this phenomenon, you could change these parameters over here, and then they would react slightly differently, and you could prove a point or something like that. So I think, Kevin, you're next.
Wait, first, does anyone have any questions for Nathan? If you do, unmute yourself.
I have a question.
Sure.
Yep.
What do you mean by acid neutral and base neutral?
Okay, so ion trapping is what happens when a non-ionized drug, if you take it, non-ionized molecules can pass through phospholipid bilayers.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole concept of ion trapping is that if you have a weak acid, so something that is a net negative charge, so something that has a charge, it's not a base, so it's not neutral, is inside an environment like it won't become neutral again. So as long as that is in the right spot, it won't repass through the phospholipid bilayer, and it'll be trapped. And that's sort of how you absorb drugs.
Are you saying that this is a weak acid in an equilibrium?
Yeah. So on the left here, there's lots of dark blue. So these dark blue O's are acidic water. So acidic water molecules. And so then when I put the weak acid represented by these A's, they're neutral, and so they won't react with these acidic water molecules, and they won't become ionic. That means they can pass through the phospholipid bilayer and go to this other side. This is base water, so that means it will react and it will become ionized, and it can't pass back to the other side.
I got it. Yeah.
Okay.
I've never heard of the word neutral for an acid being described. It's undissociated versus.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Great. We should move on to the next student. Just want to make sure everyone gets enough time. But good question.
All right. Yeah, it's right here. Yeah. That's
Who's up next? Is
that's
this
the B one.
Kevin? Hi, Kevin.
All right, Kevin, you're up. Hi, how are you? All right, so what I was working on was a bee simulation to further elaborate on the evolution of cooperation and to focus on the prisoner's dilemma phenomenon, where it was where a subject basically has the choice to cooperate or defect, and there's a payout matrix based on that, whether one cooperates or one defects. You know, they can either both benefit or one can benefit a lot more than another. So if I run this, I can adjust how many cooperators or defectors there are. I'll just start with both of them being the most. And as you can see, there is a hive at the bottom, a queen bee, and the goal is the rocks are flowers, and they will go to the hive once they collide with a flower, and then the bees will collide with each other. And based on whether one's a cooperator or defector, a cooperator will send another bee to the previous flower that it hit, and a defector will send it to a random location that's not a flower. Thus, like, and there's energy levels. So if a bee goes all the way just to find that there's no flower there, it uses a lot of energy and then it dies. So you can see that if there are a lot of defectors essentially and they just keep defecting each other, then a population will probably die out sooner. So I ran a lot of simulations with that, and there is a correlation between the amount of defectors and cooperators with time. Like, more cooperators do tend to have a longer survival span of a community. And I can show you the code. So as for the world, what I did was, and Doc Scheintaub helped me with this. We added a lot of traits for bees, such as a hungry level, an energy level, and that basically the hungry level would, if a bee's hungry, it can go to a flower, but if it's not hungry, it'll go to the hive. There are different hungry levels. That is the flower. So that is how we take the flower number, and that's how we get the bee to go to the exact flower that a cooperator sends it to make sure it's not random and it's the exact location. And then under bees, so those are the different hungry levels, and with each different hungry level, it sets a different function. So for example, if your hungry is 2, that is because you collided with a cooperator, and you will go to the nearest flower that the cooperator just sent you to. And if your hungry is 3, that's because you collided with the defector, and you'll go to the nearest fake flower. And yeah. So I can go back to the simulation. Oh, they all died out.
Oh. Do you have any visualization of the data that you gathered on the percentage of defectors versus the health of the hive?
Yeah, there's a slide. There's this Google slide I made. Can I go on it?
Only if you can. If not,
I shared it. Yeah, just now.
Yeah, you can.
Oh. So
I did a experiment involving 10 bees. So I would do, for example, 10 cooperators, 0 defectors, 10 defectors, 0 cooperators.
Mm-hmm.
And this came out. Do I have to zoom in more? Is that
No,
okay?
we can see.
And then there are other things you would have to keep in mind, such as where the bees start, the positioning of the flowers, which affects a lot of the energy levels too. But overall, 10 cooperators did live the longest on average.
Fantastic.
Okay. Are there any questions?
If you have a question, go ahead and unmute yourself.
I'm going to hand it over to David now.
Irene, I submitted a question in the chat.
Oh, okay. From Sue Gibbs, I love this as an illustration of the prisoner's dilemma. Does it actually relate to bee behavior?
It's more of just prisoner's dilemma. I don't think bees are actually this straightforward. But there is a sense of cooperation for bees, and there's an article which highlights on the evolution of cooperation, and bees do have a tendency, if one is defected, they become a defector. So I guess you could say that there's some aspect where it's similar to bees, but overall this is just a prisoner's dilemma simulation. Yeah.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
Okay, and David is up next.
Hey everyone, I'm David. So what I made was a Mandelbrot fractal generator. And the reason I made this was to try to push Star Logo to its limits, see how powerful it can be. Because to generate a Mandelbrot fractal with a lot of detail, it takes a lot of computation. So I want to see how powerful Star Logo was. So I'll just run it right now so you can see what it looks like. So basically what the Mandelbrot set is, the way you generate it is it's on the complex plane and every point has a function associated with it. And what you do is you take the function at that point, plug in 0, get the result, plug it back into that function and do that iteratively. And if the complex number, the result, if it goes towards infinity, it's not in the set. But if you continue to iterate the value in the function and it stays close to 0 and doesn't go towards infinity, it's in the set. So this is the basic image of the Mandelbrot fractal. So all of these black points are considered to be in the set. And then anything that's colored is not in the set. So if you imagine this as a complex plane with 0, 0 centered here, and then you take the point and plug it into the function iteratively. So the way this is generated is, if I hit redraw, there are a bunch of agents that, I'll pause it for a second. There are a bunch of agents that start in a circle and then slowly start walking in random directions. And every time they take a step, they do the calculations at that given point they're at. And basically what you do is this maximum iterations box, it's going to run that point through the function 100 times. And if after 100 times the value hasn't gone towards infinity, it considers it to be in the set. And if it stays under 2, the magnitude of the complex number, then it considers it to be in the set. So I'll unpause it again right now. And one thing that's cool about this is you can change the resolution. So for example, if I kick this number up, it'll draw it a lot faster but more blurry. And after a while, right now you can see the agents still moving around, but after a while they disappear and leave you with just the image. And you can also use the W, A, S, and D keys to move around, and you can zoom in with the arrow keys. So right now, I'm slowly zooming in on the fractal. using the arrow keys. And then once you find an interesting point you want to look at, you can again lower the resolution like this. And if I redraw, you'll slowly see it give a more detailed image of the fractal. So all of these little things are agents just moving forward. And every time they take a step, they do the calculations. And once the image is complete, they disappear. And then this drawers box is the amount of agents you start with. So for example, if I put this to just 50 and I hit redraw, the image would take a lot longer to generate because there are only a few agents walking around. But then if you put it at, say, 500, there's going to be a lot of them spawn in the circle and fill the screen. So I have a few interesting points on the fractal memorized. So you can change the center X coordinate and the center Y coordinates in these boxes right here. So if I redraw it at the point centered at negative 1.750, there's actually a little baby. It's called a baby Mandelbrot fractal where it looks like the original shape. And if I zoom in a little bit, you can see there's actually a replica fractal. It looks pretty similar to the original shape. So this is not the original one. This is a very tiny one off to the left. And again, I can get a clearer image. It takes a little bit longer, but you can get a clearer image by lowering the resolution. So basically now the agents that walk around and draw are just a little bit smaller, so you get a sharper image. But when you do make smaller agents, they take longer to generate the picture.
Very nice.
Yeah, so the idea of this was to push star logo to its limit because every agent, every time they take a step, each one is doing a maximum of 100 iterations. So if you have 500 drawers doing 100 iterations, that's what, 50,000 iterations of the function every time they step.
Mm-hmm.
So it shows that star logo can really handle all the math.
And doing all those iterations at each point is just seeing if it's tending to go to infinity or not?
Yeah, so what you do is
diverging?
Yeah, so if it diverges, so if it goes towards infinity, then it considers it to be not in the set and it will show up as a colored point.
Okay.
So actually the way you get the colors is you color it based on the amount of iterations it takes to exceed. So this first blue color takes 1 iteration. The second one takes 2 iterations, 3 iterations, 4 iterations, and then you get a repeating color scheme. So what you basically do is you divide, there's 16 different colors. So once you find out that it goes towards infinity, you take the amount of iterations and mod it by 16. So take module 16 and then you assign a color based on the result of that. So you get the repeating color. And then the black is what stays below magnitude of 2. So if I go to look at the code, I can't look at the code.
Go up and hit view code. Up a little further.
Oh, right, okay. I used to look at this one.
Yeah. So did you reach a point where it was just too slow? Like, did you try doing 500 calculations?
So the iterations can go pretty high because once you find out it goes towards infinity, you can stop iterating. So that's not really the thing that kills it. Usually what makes it very slow is the amount of drawers. So once you get the amount of drawers up above around 2,000, it gets very slow. Or if you get the resolution very small, it takes a while.
Okay.
So this is the code for the walker. So when I start, I just create a bunch of walkers in a circle using sine and cosine. And then once they start walking around, they call this is in Mandelbrot set procedure, which is you give it the points on the complex plane and it will tell you whether or not that point is in the set. So can I scroll over? How do I scroll over to the right, Doc? Because the screen is kind of messed up. Scroll over to the right, the bottom bar.
I have to go over to the bottom.
Oh, right, no. So this is kind of the most important procedure. It's called Ising-Mandelbrot set. And it's the procedure that tells you if a given complex point is in the set. So you can see repeat this amount of times, the maximum iterations. So that's the number you put into the box. So in this case, it would be 100. And then, so it'll do this. This is basically the complex math. It separates the real component and the imaginary component and does the math. So you can you can see right here, it sets the imaginary to 2 times. It basically squares the result of what you got last time and adds a number. So you can see this is the math for squaring the complex number. And yeah, that's basically how it all works.
Fantastic.
Yep. So
does anyone have questions for David? No? Well, thank you all very much. I hope you guys will share these models with us.
Mm-hmm.
And we can learn a lot from them, I bet.
Yep. Thank you.
Great. Okay, thanks. So let's see. Let me see if I could grab screen or if Hal has to release it. Hal, can you release the screen?
Sure.
Okay, and then I'll just go and finish up. If I can find, okay, there's Hal. Okay, so Hal, thus far we've uploaded the modeling change and modeling change lesson 1 from Hal. And Hal, if you are able to, can you share the rest of those lessons and we can add them to the set so we have the full module?
Sure.
That would be great. A few other things that are new on the site. We have a fall introductory unit, which is from previous years, but I think it's all perfectly ready to go. And we also have the code blocks for the water resources module. In the news, there are 5 new articles, ones of interest you might be interested in. The Girl Scouts added a whole bunch of new STEM badges, which is very cool. And someone studied the spread of the Gangnam Style video and figured out that it indeed spreads like a virus. As for events, we have a design workshop going on now in Santa Fe, and that's where Paige and Sue are with a group of teachers. There is an imagination toolbox, an MIT Star Logo Nova workshop going on in Massachusetts. And coming up, we have a computer science in science workshop offered by CSNYC in New York City. Practices, if you're interested in trying your hand at some new challenges, they're up and available. And we wanted to thank you for joining Teachers with Guts. Try to update your profile from time to time, join the discussion, catch up on some news, or find some resources and support. So thanks, everyone. If you have any suggestions or questions, you can email us at info@teacherswithguts.org. Okay, thanks, everyone. Good seeing you all. Thank you, Hal.
Thank you.
Okay, that's it for now. Bye-bye.